Good afternoon and welcome to the Rackesbaum Computer Consulting monthly webinar series. Today we're featuring Inventory Advisor in Alerts and Workflow, presented by Russ Graff and Greg Swallow. With that, I'm going to let you guys take it away.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Kelly. And Greg has allowed me to go first. So I'll go ahead and get started and kind of lay the groundwork, and then Greg will follow on. I've probably got about 20 minutes worth or so of content. And I want to certainly let you know that I appreciate your time and effort today joining us, whether you're live with us or watching it as a recording. We certainly understand you've got busy schedules and appreciate you taking some time to hopefully learn some valuable insights from us today. As mentioned, my name is Russ Graff. I have application. So in the Sage world, that's how we're known. In the non-Sage world, we're more well known as NetStock. And part of that relationship or responsibility which I have always appreciated. They're a great group. Those of you that are customers of theirs and or prospects of theirs already know that you're in great hands there, and again, appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. So with that, let's talk a little bit about supply chains. You may already be familiar with NetStock or Sage Inventory Advisor. You know that we are an application that is in the cloud and designed to help companies that manage inventory, so distributors, manufacturers, retailers, that are buying and selling, perhaps manufacturing inventory oriented products, that we help those firms deal with the volatility and the challenges of working in a very difficult supply chain. And of course, that's never been more true than today and over the last couple of years as a result of COVID and the disruptions it has caused and is still causing. You've probably seen in the news that the port at Shanghai, China has been shut down now due to very strict COVID controls in China for probably something like 7 or 8 weeks. That is a major port that is having ripple effect challenges throughout the supply chain. Many electronics products come through there, many microchips, which already were in a shortage situation. You've probably read articles of major automakers having to slow down or shut down production for days at a time for lack of microchips, probably the least expensive component in the entire vehicle. And we've all experienced this as consumers, right? I currently am waiting for a piece of furniture that I bought, and I think it's been pushed back. The delivery date has been pushed back at least 3 times now, and we're going on 6 months. So I know you have all experienced similar situations. Of course, in the news today, as we record this and speak to you, we're talking about baby formula shortages, right? And what governments and private entities can do to try to alleviate a severe shortage. So this disruption is now commonplace. It's always been part of the supply chain environment, right? There's always been challenges and issues. Prior to COVID, we were dealing with trade wars and tariffs between the United States and China and some other locations. We were dealing with all kinds of disruptions in terms of climate, right? Last summer, I think there were 4 major hurricanes that hit the Gulf Coast. So the ports in Houston and New Orleans in particular were very hard hit. And the system is so fragile and everything is so lean and tightly connected and interconnected that any of those kinds of disruptions cause ripple effects that you wouldn't even expect, right? Unintended consequences of things that you would never imagine. I mean, who would have predicted that we had a freighter go sideways in the Suez Canal for weeks and the impact that it had in shutting down other shipping going through a very critical pathway in our supply chain. So it's always been the nature of supply chains. It's never been more dramatic and challenging as it has been the last couple of years. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. Right? We are experiencing very long lead times. We are increasingly seeing stockouts of various products, and it's kind of a whack-a-mole thing, right? That we may still have COVID surges in different parts of the globe that have an impact, and that gets solved and it shows up somewhere else. And then we just get past that and we get a war in Ukraine, which is now going to cause severe challenges with our food supply. Huge amount of fertilizer comes out of there. Sunflower oil comes out of there. other kinds of raw materials that feed other manufacturing processes. So that whole environment, not even thinking about all the human tragedy that we're seeing daily in the news, huge disruption to supply chains that is just now beginning to show its effects, right? And will probably show its effects for years, not to mention sanctions that will be very long lasting, we expect. So, so rising costs, transportation costs have gone through the roof, 10x what they were for containers coming across the oceans. And we have continued labor shortages as well. We've all heard talked about the news. We've probably experienced it in our own businesses where there's just been a real serious labor disruption thanks to COVID, getting people rethinking their careers and what they're doing. And particularly in supply chain, because of all the disruption and volatility, we're seeing an increasing amount of burnout from supply chain experts and practitioners in industry. People really have been stressed, and we're seeing that has an impact. So lots of stuff going on there. If you're listening to this, if you're part of this presentation, you're probably nodding your head and seeing yourself in that story. So I won't belabor it any further. But point is, we're going to be in this challenge for a long time to come. I get a chance to talk to other thought leaders and practitioners and experts, consultants in the industry. And the most optimistic story I've heard is that maybe by next second quarter, a year from now, things are starting to calm down. But more often than not, I'm hearing people talking about terms of 2 years yet, at least, before things settle into just normal disruption, right? And then the other thing to think about is that there already were some trends taking place in our supply chains that pre-COVID that really have been accelerated and have become more important and critical to us to think about. So, so you've probably already seen lots of discussion, and maybe you've already taken some steps about just the general movement of the supply chain and the effort to simplify our supply chains and bring some of the product development and manufacturing closer to home, either nearshoring in places like Latin America or Mexico or Canada if you're in the US, or perhaps even onshore in the US with some manufacturing processes. I think the types of manufacturing that is still highly automated, I think will still have a big presence in Asia. But anytime there's now customization or assembly work going on that is somewhat custom make to order type environments, those benefits of moving that stuff overseas have really vanished quite a bit. And so we're seeing more and more movement. So what does that mean to you in the supply chain? That may mean your suppliers are getting closer and now have different lead times. They may be coming through different ports. They may have different processes, maybe different vendors altogether that now can accommodate you. So that has impacts in terms of your planning, right? And how you manage those adjustments and changes over time. And that's a long-term trend that's probably not going to change. And we're going to continue to have to deal with that. Another concept is one of digitalization of the supply chain. One of the accelerators that COVID has created is, with all of us working from home in many cases for extended periods of time, we now had to really digitize or utilize automation and technology to share information, to communicate more effectively with our customers and with our vendors and suppliers. And so that created a huge influx of new tech coming in, new processes, lots more data to manage and so forth. So the whole concept of digitizing and digitalization of the supply chain, again, was already a trend. The leaders, the big boys in our markets, the Walmarts and Amazons and Targets and the big box players and so forth, already had committed huge resources, time and money and capital, human capital, to this effort. That has now flown heavily into the small and middle-sized businesses, the middle market as it's known. And that's a trend that's going to continue because we've also seen now, we were kind of forced into some of these things, but now we're seeing the benefits of that and saying, yeah, that's really the right way to do business, especially if we have limited labor. I've got to be more efficient and effective with the labor I've got, et cetera. So all these things kind of play together. The concept of a sustainable supply chain has a lot of different factors associated with it, but I think a common one that you might think of or are experiencing is the fact that you need to have multiple sources for many of your materials and raw materials and products and subcomponents that you may be purchasing from your vendors. Because if I'm dependent on product coming through Shanghai and Shanghai is shut down, do I have a secondary supplier that maybe comes through a different location and maybe has a shorter travel aspect and has a different cost associated with it as a result? So we've got that sustainability issue that we have to deal with as well. And then the fourth comment here is something called ESG. That stands, it's a new acronym that you may be seeing. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it has to do with environmental, social, and governance. And these are new factors that maybe your customers, if you're supplying larger players, they're going to be asking you for compliance in these areas. Environmental, of course, has to do a lot to do with carbon footprint and climate control, climate issues. The social network issue is really more about societal changes and laws and labor laws and all those kinds of things and good working conditions. And then just in general governance and government compliance with all kinds of statutes and regulations and so forth that are out there. So if you're doing business with publicly traded companies or larger firms, you may be asked by them as you are being part of their supply chain to make sure that you're in compliance in these areas and that you can prove it, give evidence of it. So some changes there as a result of what's going on. So a number of trends, again, that were already in place have been accelerated as a result of COVID in many cases. And so all this combines for you as an individual or in your organization, you got challenges, right? You're still experiencing plenty of stockouts because of all the supplier issues that we've talked about, but you may still have some items that are in significant excess because you've had volatile demand. Products that you thought were going to sell or move by a certain rate at a certain time, that's not the case because of everything that's going on in supply chains. So you may have stockouts at the same time you have excess inventory elsewhere, maybe in other locations or other product lines in your organization. So there's a balancing act there that has gotten much tougher for you to manage. And the result is that your folks, both those of you that are in the supply chain doing the buying and purchasing and inventory planning, are ended up spending way too much time trying to figure this stuff out, typically dumping data to Excel or other BI tools, maybe working with your consultants at Vracas Bloom to help dump data and write reports, maybe custom reports. And that's a step in the right direction, right? I'm not saying it's not, but if you really evaluate it, you find out that you're spending way more time manipulating data than you are making decisions and taking action on that data, right? So if there's a way that we can move that slide down a little bit and free up some time for you to be doing the more critical things like communicating with your customers and maybe your customers' customers and your suppliers and maybe your suppliers to really understand what's going on, making some of these changes, managing those transportation costs, finding those secondary vendors. There's so much important work for those folks to be doing that jockeying data is not optimal. It doesn't make sense. And then the other big challenge we have is, especially if you're using those sort of semi-automated, non-technical type tools, you're going to get very poor forecast accuracy. You're not going to be able to get a good picture of what that future demand looks like, which then drives all these other decisions downstream in terms of what needs to be produced or purchased to meet that demand. So some real serious ongoing challenges there. And that's really what the NetStock application and Sage Inventory Advisor are designed to address. And so we like to think in terms of best practices, but there's really three components to that. There's a people component, there's a process piece, and then there's the technology piece, right? So we've got to have the right people in place and have them trained up correctly. We've got to give them good processes to follow in terms of how to place orders, how to receive goods when they come in, how to manage my warehouse, where do I put the most popular items to make it easier to cross dock, and all those kinds of things. There's lots of process involved here, and we've got to have people trained up and following those processes. But we would also argue that there's a real strong place for proper technology to support those best practices in terms of people and process, right? And so if we just break it down into a couple of key areas for you to be thinking about, one is we strongly recommend that you want to do a better job of and more granular job of classifying your items in your inventory. What SKUs are you carrying, and track them by value and by speed of movement, not just by value, right? We all think of an ABC ranking of items by value in terms of cost or margin, perhaps. And that's very valid. But we also need to understand within that, what's the another piece of that matrix, right, is how fast do they move? And if I do a good job of that, I can understand the nature of the items in my inventory, and I can now establish policies and targets and metrics around the different properties there, right? The different nature of those items. So classifying items really helps you hone in and create policies that are appropriate. Then there's an area of safety stock, right? We have this concept of just-in-time inventory that's been prevalent for the last 10 years. And if nothing else, COVID has shown that was a pendulum that had swung too far. We were too lean, we were too just in time in trying to get there. And so now we see any disruptions really cause severe challenges for us in terms of stock outs. So the concept of having a safety stock or a buffer stock is really about mitigating risk. And that's supply risk, ever more prevalent today, but also demand risk, right? What if demand goes up for something that's unexpected? Do I have a buffer to manage that? And do I really understand the nature of that demand and supply environment so that I have the right level of safety stock? And is that safety stock dynamic and able to change with the changing environment, either on supply or demand or both, right? So instead of just in time, you think of safety stock as just in case. What if my supplier is late? What if my demand goes up? And doing those kinds of what if scenarios is really critical to managing what could be a dynamic factor in your organization. Obviously, planning for those extended lead times. Again, there are some of those are natural, right? We've always had to deal with the Chinese New Year. If you're buying some products from Europe, you know that during August things slow down when half of Europe goes on vacation or holiday, as they call it, right? So now we've got a more robust area there to really manage in terms of extended lead times. We've got to be able to plan for that, plan ahead of it, hopefully, and work through that. Again, improving your forecasting accuracy is critical. Having the right tools and proper math. And again, this is a key area where technology can really help. There are some sophisticated algorithms available to you in the Sage Inventory Advisor application that really do a great job of not only assigning an initial forecast, but then monitoring the accuracy of it. It's never going to be perfect. What you're trying to do is get close. And the closer you can get, the better you can manage all these other factors in your data stream and your supply chain. And then again, sharing data up and down that supply chain. We talked about the digitization and the need to stay on top of what's going on in the marketplace. Data sharing is a great way to do that. It gives you value-added conversations with your suppliers. Imagine if you could tell your supplier, here's what the next year is going to look like based on my snapshot today of when I'm going to purchase and how much I'm going to purchase and when I'm going to need it by. If you can have that data shared with your suppliers, how much better of a chance do they have of meeting your expectations? So there's a real critical component there. And then the last piece, I talk about aligning business units and collaborating. This is really internally. So besides communication externally to your customers and your marketplace and your suppliers, think about what I need to have happen internally to make sure that you're all aligned. And that you can properly collaborate. There's a concept that you probably are aware of called sales and operations planning. Another way that some consultants use it is SIOP, sales, inventory, and operations planning. However you think of that acronym, SNOP or SINOP, what it really amounts to is, can I have data internally that we can all agree on in terms of what our demands are, what our supply environment looks like, what our production capacities are, et cetera, what our financial situation is, what are the right policies in terms of safety stock, so that I can hit a target of 95% fill rate. If I want to get to 98%, what does that mean in terms of my capital investment in inventory and my purchasing? So the different business units, finance and operations and purchasing and so forth, all have to really be agreed on a common set of data, and then make decisions based on that, put up strategy, and then execute against that strategy, right? Operations folks just want to execute against a plan. Tell me what the plan is. So this internal effort is really critically important. And then the last thing I'll mention here before I just give you a glimpse of the application itself, it's really about some, in these volatile times, you really need to be able to do some what if planning and scenarios, right? What's my best case? What's my worst case? What if this happens? And so trying to do that in a spreadsheet or in a BI tool, or certainly in any kind of native ERP reporting, is very difficult, right? If you've got a Sage ERP, you've got a tremendous amount of quality data that's timely and accurate, and that's a great foundation, right? But it doesn't give you all the inputs you need, and it doesn't give you the flexibility to do this kind of what if planning very easily. So if we can take all that great raw data that you're capturing through all these transactions all day, every day, all the ins and outs and movements of inventory, grab that data and put it into a tool like the Sage Inventory Advisor application, and now let you run some modeling and look at where your risk is and make some decisions around that. That's a huge advantage for you. And it's what you really need to compete in today's marketplace, because your competitors are doing it. And the big boys are certainly doing it and have been doing it. So you need to have the ability to do some of this scenario modeling and really help you manage risk. Look at those dynamics in the buffer stocks. Look at how your forecasting is improving and getting better and managing that over time. And then it's really about having the right tools to be able to do that. So hopefully that gives you a sense of kind of the scenario, the atmosphere, the environment that we're operating in. Again, if you're in it, you know it. You've had it. You've been dealing with it now for a couple of years. But now the question becomes, okay, how do I get better at it, right? How do I manage these things? I've got good people. I think I've got good processes. I've worked with my consultants at Brockus to help me understand how to get the most out of my Sage ERP. Now, what else can I do to take the next step and move along that maturity curve, if you will, of proper planning? And that's where we would suggest and encourage you to take a closer look at the Sage Inventory Advisor application powered by NetStock. We've got a number of existing customers already within the Brockus Bloom community, and I'm sure they would be able to share with you their experience and how we deploy and so forth, and the positive impact that we've been having for those other customers. And in the interest of time today, and to leave some time, obviously, for Greg to share some important information on the alerts and workflow application, I thought I would just give you a couple of quick screenshots. First is the dashboard. Our customers log in and see a dashboard when they first get into the application, and it's really the control center. It really gives you a quick snapshot of the health of your inventory. What's my current stock status? How much of that is in excess? Where do I have more coming in that I don't need yet that's about to create more excess? And then conversely, from a customer perspective, how am I doing in target fill rates? Am I achieving the goals there? And I can slice and dice this data by buyer, by product line, by location, by any way that you can think of inventory and how you organize it in your organization. We can slice and dice and present that on the dashboard that's appropriate for you. So how am I doing on that fill rate? Where am I already stocked out, and what might that cost me in potential sales? Where am I about to stock out? I've still got inventory, but based on my supply situation and my demand for those items, where am I likely to run out before the next replenishment arrives so I can get ahead of the curve? So this dashboard, as you can see, color-coded, graphical, really easy to navigate. And this is, by the way, if you've seen our product before, you'll notice maybe that this is a brand new interface. We've just recently released a major upgrade to the application that is more effective and powerful than ever. We've got over 2,000 companies around the globe using this application today, as I may have mentioned. Every one of those logged in this week to a brand new interface, and it has gone extremely smoothly. Our team has done an outstanding job of rolling this out, preparing our customers for the transition, and we've had very few glitches this week. Even though we've been very on guard watching for any feedback, it has gone really well. So this new interface really is world-class and makes the product even better than what it was in terms of your ability to see what you need to see and take action on it. I mentioned earlier the concept of classifying your products. This just gives you one screen, a glimpse of one of the ways that we do that. We sort of have this 9-box color-coded matrix. So where you see the green and blue and red and so forth is a way that we're identifying which items by ABC ranking and low, medium, high ranking of speed of movement or velocity, what that looks like in terms of quantities and costs and margins and all different kinds of ways that we can manage that and look at that, and then set policies accordingly. So this gives you a little bit of a feel for how we assist you in going through that classification process. We do it automatically, but then you have the ability through all kinds of parameters and levers and so forth to manipulate that to meet your specific requirements. And our consulting team at Netstock helps you get that deployed properly and configured, and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And then the last thing I'll show you here before I turn it back over to Greg is to, the key result, one of the key results of all this analysis that we do is to help you create an optimal purchase order or production order if you're in manufacturing. So given all this information, all these analytics, what do I need to do now to either keep myself in a balanced state if I'm already there, or to get myself back into a balanced state if something has gone haywire in my supply chain? Right. So very quickly, we show you, here's our recommendations. Here's why. Here's all the supporting evidence and argument as to why that's our recommendation. You as a buyer or planner, supply chain manager can look at all that stuff and agree or disagree, make a change, upgrade, change the quantities that we recommend, whatever it might be. Maybe do some more additions to this, which we help you to do to fill a container or get to a certain quantity for discounts or whatever the situation is. We give you the visibility of really great interface to be able to very quickly, in really literally a matter of minutes, create an optimal purchase order that for many customers have just been a life changer for them. So now they can get on with their other important work, right? Let's get this done, create the information here with all the good supporting information, click a button, go create the PO now automatically for me in my ERP, and I move on to the next one and let the ERP do what it does, right, in terms of workflows and so forth, which is a good segue to my colleague, Greg Swallow, who will talk about workflows and alerts and how that maybe now takes over what we've already accomplished from our perspective.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Russ. I'm just going to do this and then do this. And I should be on main screen here. Oops. Yeah. Can you confirm you can see that screen?
I see the 3 value props.
Perfect, perfect. First, thanks very much, Russ. Lots of information, really quick, and we've all experienced what the supply chain is doing to us and trying to get anything to happen right now. Second, if there's anyone from Sage that's going to see this, I apologize to the branding police. Sage has just changed out its new logo, so we're just trying to get those worked out within this presentation. I'll continue on from actionable insights in the 3 value propositions. When you think of Sage Alerts and Workflow, I want you to think of automating the detecting of critical needed information, automate the delivery of that information, and automate the process of acting on that information. And that's really what Sage Alerts and Workflow is bringing to the equation. So let me see if we can move forward here. Next slide. All right. So what is Sage Alerts and Workflow? Alerts and Workflow is a software solution that automates if-then process for your organization's ERP, HRMS, CRM, and any of the ecosystem products that wrap around your enterprise to move it forward. So if this activity or condition happens, then do that. So just playing on some of the things that Russ had talked about from the supply chain, we'll talk about that from a Sage Alerts and Workflow and how we can add value to the overall process. If a new order comes in, then send an invoice to a client. But some other things that has to happen too when a new order comes inbound to your system, and we'll talk about that. If a PO needs approval, then notify the CFO. Each one of these transactions that happens within your system also has a response that someone has to deal with within your organization. Let's just go to here. So forms delivery. In your organization, when a purchase order comes inbound, what's on that PO that needs to be aware of? Who do I need to send that information to? PO inbound has order by date, ship by date, cancel by date. Who needs to know that information? Who can we send an alert to? Who needs to be copied on that order that's coming into it? When an invoice is sent out, who needs to get that invoice? Does the customer get it? Does the customer and the salesperson get it? any forms delivery that wraps around your ecosystem or wraps around Sage can be automated and delivered out to it. So if it's a quote, an invoice, a statement, a dunning notice, a picking list, a recipient, everything can be automated to come from the system so you're not interacting with it. Exception management, and this is critical in a supply chain. Do you have order by date, ship by date, cancel by date? Do you have orders that you have to fulfill or kill? If I order 100 and you can't fulfill the 100, you can only fill 70. Are you allowed to send the 70, and are you allowed to create that back order for 30 orders? Or is it a kill and then we picked it up on the next transaction, right? So we want to be able to see how many orders that are processing through and manage that we always have 100% order, because your customers are grading you as a vendor, right? So the more orders that you don't fulfill going through as 100%, you're being graded and they'll start looking for another vendor. So we want to make sure that we're capturing that information and looking at it from exception management. Is an order has to go COD, right? Cash on delivery. Does an order have a scenario where if it's shipped on Friday, deliver to dock 5, if it's shipped on the weekend or arrives on the weekend, ship to dock 6? Do we have special instructions on that order? This order has to be palletized in a particular way. This order has to be packaged in a particular way. It can only exceed a certain height or a certain weight or a certain dimension. That information has to get to someone in shipping so that they're aware of it's going to happen, so it doesn't get to the final destination and they're expecting it to be hand bombed into the DC, and you're sitting there with a fork truck item. So exception management is documents are flowing through Sage can be identified and alerts created to let everyone know that this is going to happen going forward. You deal with time response. So if things that have to happen in a certain amount of days, if this didn't happen, send an alert. So when we were creating orders and we're making shippings, would it be helpful to have your shipping department know what has to be shipped today, tomorrow, and maybe for the balance of the week? Alerts can go out to say, this is what's coming to you tomorrow. So if they're doing staging and picking and that sort of idea, or if they need to coordinate people or bodies, that they're all in the right place to have what's going out in that shipment going forward. So anything that we're looking at from a time response, this needs to be done at this particular time. We can create an alert to either tell you that's coming, so maybe the day before, maybe an hour before. Maybe if it didn't happen, we can trigger within that time, sending another alert, hey, something was supposed to happen and didn't happen. And maybe we want to gather that up at the end of the week and then look at it holistically and say, look, we've missed these 5 items. What did we do wrong? So anything that's time sensitive, that has a time check or a time associated with it, we can create an alert and send it out. Now these alerts, because not everyone's sitting at their desk, can be sent out by email, but they can also be sent by SMS. So everyone in your organization has a phone. They can receive it on their phone. We can also send this to a web screen. So if you're in a situation where you have screens up within your organization that people look up and say, okay, we have all these orders in-house, these are new orders coming in, these orders are being picked, we can create, send that information up to those screens through webcasting so that everyone has eyes on it or visibility to what's happening. So do you have situations where we're dealing with threshold monitoring, right? So thresholds would be, I've got orders coming in, but orders inbound versus my inventory on hand, I don't have enough inventory to fill those orders. The order coming in, the order I have on hand exceeds the quantity of inventory I have within my system. Do I have an outstanding purchase order to a vendor to replenish that? Do I have an outstanding work order to create items or bill of materials to create that orders to replenish my inventory? If we don't have those things in place, let's have an alert. And if you think of us as a smoke detector for your business, we're looking at things from inside the business and telling you. We're a BI or BA tool, you need to know where the problem is and go looking for it. Sage Alerts and Workflow is sitting inside the application telling you these problems are existing. And this is important so you don't get to the end of the week, the end of the month, and go, geez, if we'd only known, we could have solved that problem. So think of threshold monitoring on past due amounts, quantities back ordered, discounts given, gross profit margins, all those things that we can look at through threshold monitoring. This is what it's supposed to be. This is the variance that you'll accept, and this is where we exceeded from that variance. Do you have situations from assignments and approval? Do you have things that I need to get my boss to sign off because it's over 5,000? I need everything from a quantity work orders coming through. Someone needs to have to deal with it. I need a special machine. Anything that has an assignment and approval, Sage Alerts and Workflow can move that data from Sage 100 or all the ISV solutions around it out to the recipient. And again, not necessarily inside your building is the answer that you need. It may be with one of your vendors, it may be with one of your customers. And so using the software to fill in those gaps and saying, I need this to send out to someone. So you're not waiting for someone to find the problem and identify it. We can send that out from the software, moving from the application itself. And then enterprise-wide auditing. We have lots of different applications that wrap around your business to make it run. Not necessarily are they having sharing the same data files. And so by using Sage Alerts and Workflow, we can look at customers and addresses and bill tos and items and quantities and so on in multiple different solutions, and then do a comparison and tell you where there's a gap within the auditing of it, what has changed. So if something is being audited within the application, in either of the application, a notification's come up. And then we can say, hey, you're missing some of the data here, and when it's applied here, or you have similar type data in two different applications, and this is what would you like us to do? So if something has changed in an order coming inbound, and it's over $10,000, so who do we want to notify? Maybe it's a salesperson, maybe it's the sales manager. If an order comes in and the margin is changed within that, who do we want to notify? Is it a finance person? Is it the sales manager? Things that are being changed and audited outside of the norm, because we all work in the world of, if it's running fine, great, I only want to deal with the challenges that I'm dealing with that come to my attention. That's where the application can let you know what's happening that you're about to deal with or have to deal with or have to be aware of. If you're dealing with reports within your organization, these could be SSR reports, they could be Crystal reports, they could be .doc reports. Someone is doing this today within your organization, dispersing that and running around and giving it to different people. And they're taking those reports and they're going through them line by line and pulling out the data that is specifically important to them. And so, interesting, but wouldn't it be, instead of delivering the haystack, why couldn't we just deliver the needles? If I could give each one of your people within your organization the specific data that they need to make their business, their day run faster or streamlined, I don't need to know the whole story. I just need to know what's important to me. By extracting out the important parts and giving those to the shipping people, to the manufacturing people, to the finance people, they're seeing what's important to them to move that data instead of having a complete report. So if you're moving or you have reports and distributing them both inbound and outbound, thinking of using Sage Alerts and Workflow to deliver that to those recipients. And then data cleansing. We have an opportunity to connect to Microsoft 365, to Outlook, so that we're pulling data down from your inbound emails, if you will. We're looking at across multiple different systems, from Sage CRM to Sage HRMS to Sage ERP, where we're looking for data duplications, emails, and that sort of idea. So cleaning the data by looking at it in multiple different places is something that the software can bring to the solution. And then inactivity data. So most of our salespeople across the board are designed to be, they're called account managers, but they're given, incentivized, if you will, by selling net new software or net new whatever the solution is. But they might have 250 or 350 customers that they're responsible for. And most times, as an account manager, you're only dealing with that client if something bubbles up and it becomes a fire, right? And that's when I have to then deal with that customer. For the rest of the time, my 250, 300 customers are chugging away in the background, hoping that an order came in. Wouldn't it be interesting to look at the data historically and say, if a customer's threshold falls between 6 and 8 orders every month, that's the baseline. If it goes above that or it goes below that, send me an alert, because something has changed in their buying habits, right? And that's where a salesperson wants to be know of. If all of a sudden the customer is always ordering these SKU numbers or this quantity of those SKU numbers and something changes, let's get a notification out to the salesperson. Maybe we want to call that client and find out, hey, look, I've added a new line, or I actually have gotten rid of a line, or I've done an acquisition and bought something different. It allows the software to tell the salespeople what's going on with the accounts that they're managing, if you will. More so, if a customer hasn't bought in the last 3 months or 6 months based on historics, maybe we want to know that. Maybe we want to have the salesperson know that that customer hasn't placed an order. Historically, they've done it every 30 days or every 60 days. Once they fall outside that threshold, maybe we just want to give them a call and make sure they haven't gone anywhere. So inactivity of data within your system is just as important as active data. So using the Sage solutions to tie together to give that information out to them. And then anytime, anywhere alerts. And this is sometimes if I create a scenario where you have 20 different alerts coming out at you or 30 different alerts coming throughout the course of the day, you don't want those. But everybody goes home at night going like, there's that one piece of data that I need to know to make me sleep well at night. And it could be your AR aging report, it could be your day end sales report, it could be, did my shipments go out on time? That piece of information can be an alert and come to your phone or come to your email. And that's the one that I want after 5 o'clock, or that's the one that I want on holidays, or that. So we can set up these alerts to go to one email during your day, a second one during the holidays. And you don't have to get all 20 of them, you just let that one report. So you can slice and dice these deliveries of the alerts so that they get the ones you want and when you want it. And sometimes you're in a scenario where if I'm out, I need Russ to get that alert because he needs to deal with it. So you can set up these hierarchical levels so that anyone within the organization can get those alerts. And also, if a shipment's gone out and it's ready, or a shipment is packed and ready to ship, maybe we want to send an alert to the customer that says that shipment has been packed. Maybe we want to send a second alert saying that shipment has been shipped, right? So think of notifications where you would call someone or have to deal with someone. You can have the software just send out that information to the recipient. And then triggered updates. So if you think of Sage Alerts and Workflow looking at an event, right? An event of time has changed, a KPI has changed, something has changed that someone needs to get information. So we'll call them triggers. So if it's a client that's overdue, check their credit status. Maybe we want, if a client's overdue, we send out a dunning notice or invoice in 30 days. We send it in 60 days. We copy in the customer and the salesperson. At 90 days, we send it to the customer, the salesperson, the sales manager, and put the customer on credit hold. So those types of trigger events, if something's happened, if an item is below a minimum, create a PO, right? So Russ talked about that on, you know, how do we know that? Maybe we can have the software assist in those things. If an order is got a discount of greater than 25%, or more so, if an invoice comes in and its landed cost is more than what you anticipated because shipping costs have changed or container costs have changed, if you will, let's notify that the price per unit has gone up because the cost associated with getting it there. So those type of events, of trigger events based on time, based on dates, based on anything changing within the application that you want to know about. So again, you don't get to that end of the month and going like, geez, if we'd only known, we could have saved that customer experience, or we could have, you know, changed an event, an outcome, an event. So expanding on that, working these two products together, right? So if you think of Sage Inventory Advisor and Sage Alerts and Workflow, and Alerts and Workflow driving events out of Inventory Advisor. So an item that appears as stock at list, let's give me the top 20. Give me the top 20 items that are stocked out, and I just want that on a week. It appears as a potential stock out, right? Because there's a chance that these items are going to be. Send that to me. It is just an awareness. It's just an alert that you should keep your eyes on this. Tell me surplus orders, top 20 by value, that are coming from my system, from my inventory. What's been sitting around? What's extra? That's my dollars. That's my cash sitting there. How do I do better with it? Top exceeding items by value. So again, I've got too much of it. What should I do with it? Should I discount it? Should I move it on? Should I run a promo? Those type of things can come to me at the end of the week so I can get visibility. I've got it monthly, it can come daily, right? So you can get visibility. New items created that have stock order but not inputted into the forecast. So anything that's changed within the data movement between your inventory, your items, and that sort of idea that you want to be alerted on, an alert can be created. So when you're thinking about the products of Sage Alerts and Workflow on top of that, we're delivering alerts to you, right? From your system, from the application itself. What happened? When did it happen? Why did it happen? So that you know the minute that it does happen, so you can make an intelligent business decision and you're not waiting, or something's not going to go aha at you 3 days from now. That information can be delivered by email, can be delivered through SMS, and it could be webcasted out to it so that you can see it pop up on your screen or pop up on a screen within your organization. So when we monitor things, we're monitoring cloud-based applications. So anything that you're connecting your Sage ERP to from a cloud, and it could be simple things from SurveyMonkey to Monster Boards to Indeed, anything that wraps around that's cloud-based that you're capturing information through an API, we can drive into the system and create alerts for. On-premise applications, so if you've got SQL databases sitting around that are disparate from your other applications, we can capture information and pull that together and aggregate it. And so you get one view on your dashboard of what's happening. Websites, incoming email, and we use this internally. If you send a help at or support at or info at your company, that information gets routed by Sage Alerts and Workflow to the appropriate person, and then we tag it to see when it's followed up on to make sure that people are getting covered from. We notify them again by email and text messages and FTP sites and WhatsApp. Any way that people are the recipients of data that you need to get to them, we'll connect to it so that we're pushing that data out. We'll give it to you in a form space from invoice and POs and statements. Anything that's generated from the application that can be put on a form, we can then take that form and deliver it to their different recipients. And we do that through Crystal and SSRS or any third-party app that wraps around the Sage solution. It's delivered in both graphical, it can be embedded, it can be attached, it can be in HTML, any way of moving that data and moving it forward. And then finally, the user interface. So you have a choice in the solutions. You can get it as a cloud-based solution where it's doing connection to a cloud-based solution. So if your Sage solution is being hosted, great. We can connect to it that way as well as a cloud-based solution. But if you still are on a perpetual license on client server sitting there, we can install on the server as well. Once it's set up, the application is set up, it's a set it and forget it. The events are created, the alerts are created, and then it sits and runs and sends it out. It is licensed as a server base, so it's not licensed as an individual user. So if you've got 200 employees can be receiving alerts. It's not charged by an employee count, it's charged by the server. Those are the components of the software. In SA, we'll just run through it. So we architect on, as I say, Azure.net, that sort of idea, tying it into the application. And then just one more, some native things. You're all going to get the presentation, so I won't go through this. And then I'll just finish it off here as a cloud. There you go. If you want information about the application, and I encourage you to do it, everyone who's working with Marcus Bloom can download it, run it, work with them as a partner, and install it. It's a 30-day license. Try it, run the event pack, get the benefit out of it. And then finally, I think it's that one. With that, Kelly, I'll turn it back to you. It talks to finish this up.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Greg. You guys were great. We really appreciate you spending an hour with us, and thank you to the attendees. Always great to see you guys out there and know that we can present these to you guys and show you a little bit of what Sage has to offer. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or your favorite VBCC consultant. And everybody have a great day. Thanks again.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye-bye.